Hello, future sales leaders, and welcome back to How I Sell. As always, I am your host, Danny Leonard. And as a reminder for our second season, we're switching up the format a bit and asking the same 5 questions to some of our most admired people in sales. Today, I am joined by one of my favorite voices in sales development, Mr. David Dulany. David is the author of the Sales Development Framework. He's the CEO of Tenbound. He's spent nearly 20 years in software sales at various companies like Glassdoor, Cisco, and Infer. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you.
Of course. We're pumped to chat with you as well. Before we jump in, do you mind telling us about some of the exciting things you're working on today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we set up Tenbound as a place to get information and research and content on sales development. So definitely, if you're interested at all in the SDR world and trying to figure out prospecting and following up on inbound leads and career steps and anything SDR related, definitely check it out. And that's what we're here for. So we're super excited about that. We actually have conferences that we do, and we've got one next week and another one coming up in August, which are free and great speaker lineup on sales development, any and all in the SDR world. So definitely check those out too.
Yes, awesome. I was checking out the speaker list today. You've got Beck Holland, which is one of our favorites here at Ramped, and Nikki Ivy. So folks that our audience would love to see. So we're going to pass that on to folks in the Ramp course as well. So would love to jump into the gauntlet. I say that in jest. It's 5 questions, not super difficult, but we want to get to know you a bit and get to know some of the things that you thought about throughout your career. So are you ready? Are you ready for it?
Let's do it, man. I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, the first question, per usual, is what is the best investment that an early career salesperson can do for themselves and why?
Yeah, it's kind of not intuitive, but I would say that now is the time to really take care of yourself physically. And so it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with sales at the on the surface level. But the reason I say this is sales is a very exciting and amazing career, but it's also you've got your ups and downs. It's a roller coaster emotionally and physically. And after we get through this pandemic period, there's a lot of traveling, there's a lot of going out to see people, and it's hard on your body, and when you're coming up, in your teens and 20s, you can just abuse yourself physically, do whatever, and generally bounce back. But as you kind of get into the 30s and 40s, things start to slow down a bit. And if you can start a good foundation of taking care of yourself physically, and you'll be much more resilient, as you get into really the big money making part of your career, which is a little bit later. So it's all the stuff that your mom and dad probably told you. Eat right, get a plenty of sleep, exercise, try not to go too hard on the weekend, stuff like that. I would really emphasize that right now, getting good habits that can carry you through to when it gets really interesting later in your career.
That's extremely good advice and something that I see rarely followed, but good to note. Establishing these healthy habits for yourself is clearly critically important. And I can tell you, as somebody in my 20s, that paid attention to this, but not as probably as much as I should. It does take you a little bit longer to bounce back now that I'm in my 30s, and the same nagging, ankle, foot, whatever, takes weeks instead of days to recover from. So sound advice there.
100%. It's all about energy, and managing your energy, and the better that you take care of yourself, the more energy you're going to have. When wisdom catches up to you later. So get in the habit now. Easier said than done. I mean, I definitely, you wanted advice from somebody who's further down the path, and so it's easy to give that advice. But if you can really try to emphasize those healthy habits now and get them ingrained so that they can carry you through.
Yeah, swap the beer for a LaCroix one time.
There you go.
Yeah, question number 2. What is the biggest surprise you experienced early in your career? Why and how did it impact you?
Yeah, I would say just the realization that kind of creeps over you slowly in your career is that you're on your own, basically. I mean, um, and it's hard when you come up because you're supported by your parents, and you're supported by your school, and you're supported by all these mentors and different people throughout your life, and you kind of get into the workforce, and you're like, this should continue as it has been for the first 18 to 20 years of my life. And it depends on the company, really. You can get into really supportive, great companies that want to take care of you, but most companies, people are focused on their own narrow objectives.
That's
They're,
right.
for lack of a better word, focused on their own goals and their own family and their own problems and stuff like that, and they don't spend a lot of time thinking about you, to be
Yep.
honest. And they expect you to come in and add value to the company, and to do a great job every day, and that's pretty much it. So I think the sooner that you can realize, hey, you're on your own for better or worse, and it's up to you every day to make it happen. You're gonna save yourself a lot of grief.
Yeah, that's a for some that's a harsh reality, right? Because you are supported along the way by your parents, by school. It's always get to the next thing, get the grade. We're here to help, and then you're put into the workforce, and it's like boom, all of that stuff pretty much doesn't matter. Nobody's going to tell you. There's no career counselor to coach you. There's no teacher that's going to look out for your grades and offer assistance if you start stumbling. And it really is on you to establish that. It's one of the reasons why we founded Ramp too, is to give folks that on ramp to their career and help support them in that transitional period so they have the skills to build up. Off of this, when do you think you realized that? When was that point in your career where you realized, yeah, it's up to me?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just years of kind of beating my head against the wall, where it was like, if I just had support from my manager, or if I just had better leads from the marketing team, or if my customers would just return my calls, and sort of not having the internal locus of control, and focusing on what I could actually control in the situation, and kind of leaving my career success or happiness up to the chance of other people. And after a while, just beating your head against the wall, and then finally realizing, like, hey, for lack of a better word, nobody gives a hoot about what I'm doing. If they, I have to add value to them to get some kind of reward, and get some kind of acknowledgement. And if I sit here and wait for that, then uh, it's just making me miserable. So I mean, and that it took a long time and a lot of trial and error to finally realize that. So hopefully I can save you guys a few years.
It's great advice, great advice. And another addition off of that. So, when you started realizing it, what were some of the things that you installed in your life, in your work, to combat that or to make it so you weren't you didn't have to think I need to rely on somebody. How did you own that responsibility?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost is just having that realization, and really, really internalizing that, hey, I'm completely on my own here. I got to make it happen. And nobody's coming to save me. I have to take full 100% responsibility for everything in my life, even if it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with what, I'm doing. So, first, it's that realization and installing that, in my mindset, right? And then the next thing is self-education, because you know, and not to date myself too much, but in the old days, you had to actually go to the library and like check out books and bring them home, or drive down to a bookstore. I don't even think they have
Crazy,
those.
crazy.
Right. And it was hard, man. I mean, but now, and it kind of coincided with my realization, that you can literally get an education on YouTube. You can
Yep.
sign up for courses, order books on Kindle and read them. And so the next thing I would just recommend is take full ownership of that self education. And if you're at a point where it's like, ugh, I just don't want to deal with this anymore, take a break and stuff, watch some Netflix, whatever. but carve out a little bit during the day to like get some self education and some implement some new strategies if things aren't working for you. That is, you have a great opportunity right now with like all the stuff that's online that you can learn from.
Such good advice. It's a page out of Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership book too, and it's
Yeah.
really just taking accountability for yourself. And it's something that I've talked about with folks entering their career as well. It's before you go to a manager, before you think about asking a coworker for some question, just run a simple Google search. A lot of times the answer is just right in front of you, and you can make this work on your own before having to go ask somebody. So I think this is great advice, and really taking ownership and accountability over yourself, and having that realization that this is on you. No one else is going to do it for you. So that's great, David. Question 3: what is one mistake you made early in your career that shaped the way you operate today, and how has it shaped you?
Yeah, when I thought about that, there's a great book by Ryan Holiday called "Ego is the Enemy," and I think that one piece of wisdom that I kind of has been revealed over the last couple of years is I think where I got tripped up a lot is just having a big ego. And it's if you met me, you'd be like, why would he have an ego? I'm not like some big old square jawed person who thinks they're amazing, right? But when I say the ego got in the way, it's like I remember a lot of times I was absolutely convinced I had all the answers. I knew better than everybody else. And if I just, stick to my program and like grind it out, that I'll be super successful. And it's actually the opposite of that. I mean, just being able to be vulnerable and like humble and ask for help and seek mentorship and try to add value to the conversation first before extracting and doing things your way. That's the way to get ahead. So I would just say read that book, try to tame your ego, put it aside, and just realize you don't know everything. You don't have all the answers. Everybody else is not wrong. That's an extreme example, but I could
Totally.
see that a little bit, throughout the years, and I think it hurt.
Totally. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's not an easy thing to share always too. Uh, do you have an example, or do you have a time where you were like, okay, I gotta get out of this. I gotta stop being in your words, maybe ego driven, and more vulnerable, more willing to accept advice from others.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I work on still, and I think going from the corporate world where I was in for a number of years to entrepreneurship, it's almost because of that strong ego drive that I decided I'm just going to be my own boss. I'm not going to listen to anybody anymore. It's still something that I struggle with, and so yeah, in starting a company, for example, in the product launch or the service launch aspect of it. At first I would just launch things that I thought everybody's going to love this, right? I mean, you just launch it and I'll be a millionaire next
Yeah.
week. It
Yep.
turns out nobody wanted it. Nobody buys it because I didn't do any market research. There was no pre-planning. It was just a big ego exercise. And so literally the marketplace schools you in that effect. And so I'm still learning it today.
It's great. Yeah, I will say the transition I've made from operator to entrepreneur, you get smacked in the face really quickly by your customers, by folks engaging with your product, your content, etc. And they're very, very honest, and they're honest right away. So there's no hiding there. And the ego gets chipped away really quickly.
100%. I know the marketplace is much less forgiving than even a corporate environment.
For sure, for sure. Awesome. Well, question 4: who's had the greatest impact on your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think of two people actually, and I know that's a little outside the question, but one is, a sales leader that I worked with that gave me a chance, and he took a shot on me for some reason, and it's like it's interesting because I worked with a lot of people, and some would just blow me off completely and wouldn't listen to anything, and it was really really hard to work with them. But I remember this guy just gave me a chance to try something, and it unlocked a completely new chapter in my career. So giving somebody a shot, to do something that is a little bit outside of the box. I mean, that could, I still remember so fondly that they gave me that opportunity. And then on the flip side, it's another guy who just completely dismissed me from the first day that he met me, and just derailed me and talked smack, behind the scenes, and just
Right.
tried to push me out of the company from day one, and it's like, why? Why did that one guy think that I was great, and then the other guy just blew me off from day one? And I think it kind of comes back to that first thing that we were talking about, is we've got absolutely no control whatsoever out of anything that's not within our realm here. And you're going to bump into people throughout your career who support you, and other people who want to get rid of you from day one. So, again, you've got to be that, picture yourself like a ship, out in the ocean, a sailboat. And sometimes you got the perfect wind and there's no waves and you're tacking perfectly. Other times you're just in a typhoon, but you got to keep going.
Yep, yep. You gotta keep persisting. Uh, Curious to know on the second person. The first one
Yeah.
makes sense to me, right? So the first one is somebody gave you a shot. Obviously, you ran with that and have led a very successful career since. The second one, how did that make you feel, and how has it shaped your future interactions with folks? And I mean, so many questions. I don't mean to batch them all, but and how have you been able to
Yeah.
identify folks that are gonna do that again?
Well, I think it's one thing that I definitely took from that experience is I give people a chance. I mean, as a manager and as an owner of a company, I'm really, I try to um, lay out the foundation and be communicative, and give them all the information that I can possibly give to support them and give them a chance, to be successful. Maybe too long. I mean, I've probably let people, because there's a flip side of that, is when it's just not a good fit, and it's not good for either side. I need to get tougher about making change. And so I probably, this pendulum swung too far to just give people a chance forever, and even if it's not good. But I think it's just, I'm so scarred by those type of experiences that now it comes out in the way that I manage people. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I think you've turned a potentially negative situation into something positive and forward-looking and optimistic about folks who you bring on and folks who you manage, and how you treat people, which is exciting, and which is great to hear. Question 5, the last
Yeah.
question, something we ask all of our guests both seasons. If you could go back in time now that you have the benefit of hindsight and give a young or younger David advice, what would you give yourself? What advice would you give yourself as you were entering your career?
Yeah, it's funny, and I do a lot of self education as well, and I hear Gary Vaynerchuk give this advice to younger people, and we're about the same age, so I'm like, yeah, he's like a brother to me, although I've never met him. So the I just bring that up because a lot of times he'll tell people, hey, just try things, and don't worry about your resume. Like, I mean, it's such an antique mind frame to say, okay, I have to graduate from a top MBA school, and then I'm going to become a consultant at McKinsey for 5 years, and then I'm going to become a VP at Procter and Gamble. And like in my day, again, dating myself, but it's like you had to have this very sequential,
Yep.
logical progression on your resume in order to be taken seriously. And I just think in the last like 10 years or whatever, the whole thing has just been blown up. And the reason I bring this up is if you're getting into your career, you're going to be in your career for a long time. So just try a bunch of stuff. Just try a bunch of different positions, a bunch of different jobs, and and see which one really appeals to you, where you can help people and you can make money, and you're not completely stressed out all the time, and you love what you're doing. And even if it's a zigzag on your resume and stuff like that, don't worry about it, because if you can keep trying things until you land on something that you really like and you're motivated to do, you'll be more successful, and all that other stuff's not going to matter anyways. So I would say, try a bunch of stuff and see what sticks.
Yep, that's superb advice, frankly. It's something that wasn't taught to me when I was coming through college, too. It's not something necessarily my parents ever told me. I was raised with go to the absolute, get the best grades in high school, go to the best school you can get into, get the credential you need to get the great job out of college. And what did I do? I did, some of those steps, tried my absolute best to get the best grades. But when it came to the career after, I felt very stuck because I went to a business school, Michigan Business School, and they were all about iBanking, consulting, pushing you into that track, and that just didn't fit me. And I was like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, what's going on? Like, I should be very, very excited to go into these interviews, and I just wasn't feeling it. And it's not until really I found tech and tech sales. I started at Groupon back in the day, early, where I felt like my personality just jived a little bit better. It's fast paced. You could try things. You're experimenting every day. You're building something. The energy at a startup is much different than a bank. But I lucked into that. I found myself. I worked at a summer camp right after school. I worked at a law firm. I thought I wanted to go into law, and then luckily a friend reached out with Groupon, and I looked at their website, and nobody was wearing a suit, and I was like, this has got to be it. But at the time, I wasn't purposely trying things. I thought it was the wrong thing the whole way through. Right? I'm not in iBanking. I'm not in consulting. I remember how I felt there. So this to me is like, be purposeful with the things that you try early in your career, and try as many as you can until you get it right. And it's okay to screw up, and it's okay to fail, and it's okay to learn from those mistakes along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. I mean, and the other bit of advice I would say is it's really easy to be hard on yourself. Like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. My parents are giving me this, and especially it's hard, if you have a lot of debt coming out of school, and it's like, I got to be a lawyer now because I'm $100,000 in debt or
Yeah.
whatever, and get that paid off. So it's easy to get stuck in a situation, but your heart and your gut are telling you whether something's working or not. And maybe right now you can't like suddenly escape and like become a digital nomad or whatever it is, but you got to listen to that, and if you can make a switch, that's why I'm excited about sales development, because it's and programs like yours, because people may have not ever thought of sales and not have thought about the tech industry, and there is an entry point to get into these amazing companies, and do sales for a few years, get those skills, build up an awesome track record, make some money. And then once you're in there, it's like the sky's the limit. You could become a higher level salesperson, you could get into management, you could do marketing, customer success. There's a bunch of different routes that you could take. That's the positive thing about what we're doing.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think one superb advice again, right? Don't beat yourself up. Something that I again should have taken that. I wish I heard this note earlier in my career, especially when I was coming out of college. But two, if you wind up in a sales role, it's not necessarily that you have to stay there the entire track, but it just opens up so many doors within tech companies. including the sales only track, right? The one straightforward one is you can be an account executive, you can be a manager, you can be a VP, but you crush your role as a sales development rep. You're also opening yourself up to marketing, you're opening yourself up to customer success, you could do product sometimes. So tons of different career paths just by simply like jumping into a very energetic role at the ground floor, learning how to talk to people, how to talk to customers, how to be on an energized team. All those things, regardless if you stick in sales or not, are going to be important for the rest of your career.
100%. I mean, it's those communication skills. And a lot of tech companies, they're essentially marketing and engineering.
Right.
I mean, if you kind of boil it down, there's those two sides of the house, and there's just so many opportunities. The tech industry, I feel like, is right at the beginning. With the advent of cloud computing
Yep.
and the stuff that's happening right now, it's just the sky's the limit. So I'm very bullish. I think every company is going to be a tech company,
Yep.
at some point. And so get in with both feet, learn as much as you can. Try not to have a big ego. All the other stuff we're talking about, you're going to be great.
That's great. That's a perfect way to end, perfect thing to end on, David. And we appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with our folks, our audience. I know they're going to get a ton of benefit from this, especially because many of them are early career folks who are just starting out and need that guidance that they aren't necessarily getting back to some of the early things we said about you're on your own a bit. But thank you. It's been awesome speaking with you, and we'd love to have you back someday to share more stories on the How I Sell podcast.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and if anybody wants to reach out, or you got questions, or just statements or whatever about this conversation, I'm on LinkedIn, Dulany. I'm happy to respond back, because I love what you're doing, man, and if I can help in any way with this type of stuff, it's my pleasure. So thanks, Dan.
Sweet. Of course. Thanks, David. Have a great one.